Hi, everyone. Welcome to one of our virtual town halls. My name is Lori Cohen. I'm the founder and executive director of the Beagle Alliance. As many of you know, we've been doing these town halls for the last number of years since we started, and we've been really blessed to have some amazing guests, one of which tonight is Chelsey Marino, who is a canine behavior expert, the founder of Command Canine. And so again, we're going to do question and answer. We are being recorded because we will put this up on our YouTube and on our site later. So welcome, Chelsey. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Lori. And thank you everyone else for being here today. Do you want me to just go ahead and get started, or do you want to wait a second?
You know what? I'm letting people in as we go along. So let's go ahead.
Okay, perfect. I want to start by saying I hope today you learn something. Firstly, you have a deeper understanding of dogs who maybe are super fearful or have been through some trauma. And most importantly, I hope you have some easy to implement steps that you can use if you have your own dog at home who's struggling with some of the things we talk about today. So as I start, I can talk about dogs all day. So if anyone has a dying question, raise your hand, or I'll try to pause and ask if we need to do some questions in the middle. Otherwise, we can knock everything out at the very end. Okay, and I'm going to share my screen. So let me go there first and try to get this figured out. So bear with me for 1 second, and then I will jump right in.
We're pretty casual, so no.
Let me know. I should be going full screen here, so let me make sure. Okay, can we see?
Looks great.
Okay, perfect. Before we start, I want everyone to know a little background about me and why I feel like I can be talking about this right now. I have been training dogs professionally for about 10 years, and I've owned Command Canine for about 7. Throughout that time, I've worked with thousands of dogs, and my favorite dogs were always the ones who, what I say is like, make you work for it a little bit. The ones who are extra fearful or not the happy-go-lucky golden retrievers or labs that a lot of people like. I like the ones who are nervous more so. So a little bit of how my expertise in this got started. I want to tell you the story about Blue. So early in my career, I was asked to help an owner with her dog Blue. She had just found him tied up at a construction site that she was working at. She suspected he was neglected, super malnourished, had a lot of medical issues, and she wanted to do what most loving owners want to do, which was help him. So she contacted me, asked if I could help him with his anxiety and some obedience. So when he first came to me, he wouldn't move. He was frozen, his eyes were wide, but no one was home. Body was tense, completely shut down. If I called him, he would freeze. If I walked towards him, he would absolutely panic. I thought that he had been conditioned to believe that nothing that he did mattered. And this is what I encountered that's called learned helplessness. So learned helplessness is a state of mind where a dog's been so deprived of choices that they just stop trying altogether. When I realized this, of course, I realized traditional training wouldn't work for him. He didn't need commands. He needed to learn he was safe, that his choices matter, and that humans in general could be trusted. So our first week together, we were connected at the waist, literally. I tied a 6-foot leash to me and I tied a 6-foot leash to him, and he followed me everywhere I went. If I went into the kitchen, he came into the kitchen. We didn't talk. I didn't look at him at all. I didn't offer any treats or try to bribe him with any toys. All I wanted him to do was just stick with me and study me. And after 5 days, he graced his shoulder on my leg. And the next day, he rested his head on my foot. At that point, I realized I had earned his trust. And now I could start building his confidence and teaching him how to dog. Blue changed how I train dogs forever. I, at that point, realized that I wanted to dedicate my work to these type of dogs. And after working with hundreds and, probably over 1,000 of dogs like him, I now can say that my specialty is in the realm of PTSD and trauma and super fearful dogs, which brings me to the opportunity I've gotten to work with former research dogs, which is what we're kind of here to talk about today. I've worked with them directly out of the lab all the way through having years already with their new owners. And there are some commonalities in these cases that I've seen. And that's what I want to talk about today. So like I said, I could talk about this all day long, but I tried to break things down into 4 different categories so we could stay on topic here. And the 4 main things I want to talk through is understanding what trauma is and its physiological impact on behavior, what works and what doesn't work for these dogs, the common patterns and challenges that I've seen, and then how to create the change and help them thrive, which is where we'll get into the more practical stuff. So whether you've adopted a fearful dog, had your own for a while, or you're just here looking to better understand them, I hope that you can have some tools today to really make a difference. And not because any of this is going to make your dog the confident, carefree golden retriever that you may have next door, because some of them will never be like that at all. But because learning some of these things and truly understanding them is what I consider to actually set them free. Okay, anyone have questions so far? All right, moving on. Bringing home a fearful or traumatized dog is nothing like bringing home a typical rescue dog. They might refuse to eat, or they will only eat their poop. They will be afraid to go outside. They may shut down completely. And instead of leaning into the comfort of their new home, they'll freeze or hide. Some of them may growl when you touch them. Some of them may pace anxiously or be completely unable to settle. Owners try to do the right thing, and sometimes nothing really seems to work. So when that happens, owners are left feeling like this, where they feel helpless, frustrated, and guilty. So this is why I think having this conversation really matters, is because these dogs need more than just training. Because while love and safety are essential in these cases, these things alone aren't going to teach them how to cope with stress or erase years of the survival instincts. Owners need a plan and a framework of how to give them choices and set clear boundaries, knowing when to push and when to take a step back, and understanding what can actually be overcome and what we need to just accept. So these are the things we're going to cover today. And that's my favorite little baby ever. Her name's Cranberry. And she's just a sweetheart. Okay. So trauma in dogs, trauma in humans, and trauma in dogs is not a single negative experience. Everyone thinks it's this one big thing that happens, and most of the time it's not. Most of the time it's prolonged or severe exposure to stress that ends up altering the neurological and physiological responses that animals have. So when a dog or a human experiences this stress without a way to escape or cope, their nervous system actually changes. This is when you see heightened reactivity, heightened aggression, hypervigilance, learned helplessness, which is what Blue had, or a completely overactive fight or flight, and they're just pinging everywhere. So trauma physically changes the way that the brain processes things, and it often keeps these dogs in that state long after that event actually happens. How trauma shows up in behavior. Some of these things that I've seen a lot with the dogs I work with. The first being PTSD reactions, which is what is going on here. A lot of the time you'll see this in the form of a sleep startle, growling when you go to touch them, a dramatic random shift in behavior, or involuntary flashbacks. The other thing would be hypervigilance, which is where they're constantly scanning the environment. They can't settle down, always looking for an escape route, or have a big reaction to minor noises. Then we have aggression. Everyone knows what aggression looks like, but most of the time when we see it in cases like these, I see it over guarding of food, water, toys, space, or a particular person, or I see it when they feel they're going to be confined or they're going to be tricked in some sort of way. Aside from the PTSD stuff, other than that, it happens in these fashions. And then learned helplessness, we've already talked about. That's where they're freezing, acting if they're invisible, stiff body, vacant eyes, or complete emotional shutdown. Then you have the opposite of fight, which is the flight response. So this is when they'll pull violently, trying to get away, completely avoiding certain rooms. They'll throw themselves at doors or dig under fences. This is super important. Dogs are severe flight risks when they get adopted out. So understanding this and having the safety measures in place is really, really important. And then we have OCD or stress behaviors. Repetitive licking, spinning, over grooming themselves, chasing invisible shadows or invisible flies, and then also just destroying things that are there. And then we have trust issues. Flinching, ducking, pulling away when somebody reaches towards them, even if it's someone they trust already. Extreme sensitivity around the neck, paws, or face, and over suspiciousness or pessimism. This one I see almost every single time is these dogs feel you're 100% going to trick them. Everything is going to, the sky's falling all the time. It's frankly really sad to see. They're just big pessimists. Questions so far? Yell it out because I can't see everyone's face if you do have one. Okay. So when biology meets behavior, behavior starts with what's actually happening inside the body. And you can't change behavior unless you know where it's coming from. So a lot of owners and a lot of trainers, when they see some of these major issues come up, they try to fix what they see. They'll see the barking, they'll see the avoidance behaviors, they'll see the aggression, but they don't realize that the body is designed to react that way. So in order to fix that, we have to change the biology of what's going on. And then we can work with it instead of working against it. Stress is not always caused by one big event like we talked about. Instead, it comes from change from the norm of any kind. And I put this very big because this is really important. And a lot of people think stress is always bad. And stress isn't always bad, and stress isn't always good. And there's not really a difference physiologically, but what it is it's just change. Good change, bad change. The bigger the change, the bigger the stress. As an example, this is what is called the layered stress model. This is a good example of how humans will hold stress. We have small stressors such as waking up late, trying a new hobby, getting stuck in traffic, or if you're an introvert, sometimes meeting new people is stressful. Like I said, some of these are good, some of these are bad. Then we have moderate stressors, a job deadline, starting a new workout routine, or hosting your family for the holidays. And then we have heavy stressors or longer term, which would be moving to a new home, having a major health issue, or having a baby. And in the dog example, they also carry stress like this. We have environmental stresses, which is a loud noise, a rainy day, which a rainy day could be good or bad, depending on the dog, coming across an unexpected dog, different training stresses, so learning new behaviors, being around some of their triggers, and learning how to self-regulate. And sorry, I'm moving this there. Okay. Lack of clarity. So if there's inconsistent rules, unpredictable routines, or if you've decided you want to try and set more boundaries with your dog who you maybe haven't done before, that can create some lack of clarity and some stress. lifestyle, trying a new exercise. For example, I taught my dog how to swim last year and he loved it, but he came back exhausted every day and just really hyped up on stress. But it was good stress, but it was still a heavy stress. If they learn to be dependent or if they have a lack of rest. And then there's physiological and health stresses, which would be their trauma, their new food, different arthritis or physical issues, and then different genetic issues. So when all of those stresses pile up, you may see a dog or a human, of course, we're all probably guilty of this, of reacting at something small, not because of the thing that is small, but because of everything that happened before it. So we have all of these things kind of piling up in our lives, and then one little thing happens and we just snap at our spouse, or we, get mad in traffic or whatnot. And dogs are the same way. So in order for us to balance the stress that they carry every day, we have to prevent some of these things from piling up. We can do that by managing their stress, setting consistent rules with them, making sure that they have decompression time. So making sure they can go out and sniff or they nap enough, and definitely staying on top of pain management and getting them the proper nutrition. So I want to be clear about this part, and that is that this isn't about avoiding stress altogether. It's actually the opposite. But it is about picking the right moments to give the right stress or to work through the right stress so your dog can succeed. And that will make sense in a second when we move to the next slide. Let's go. Okay. So this is an unhealthy nervous system. This is your baseline. And as an unhealthy nervous system, you're going to see spikes. Spikes going down, you'll lead to deep depression, fatigue, the learned helplessness, or just disconnection altogether. And the high elevation, I guess, if you will, you'll have panic, extreme startle, hypervigilance, and then rage. So some dogs, some people are all the way up in the high range of spikes, and some dogs are all in the low range of spikes, and some dogs, like I said before, are just kind of ping-ponging all over the place. This is what a healthy nervous system looks like. So a lot of people will say a healthy nervous system is just staying consistent along this line right here, but it's not. A healthy nervous system has the fluidity to go up and down and go from moments of overwhelm or frustration and then balance it back, and then maybe you get a little overtired or confused and you are having okay, sorry, I muted. Different ability to go in and out of those different stress states, and that's called regulation. And again, like I said, I want to be clear, I'm not trying to eliminate this, but what I want in dogs is I want to move them from the unhealthy nervous system to a healthy nervous system. I want them to be able to bounce back or regulate themselves a lot better so they don't hit those big stress spikes. They can flow in and out easier. Okay. This is the brain. This is not a dog brain, but for the sake of how I'm going to explain this, I use a human brain, but the dog brain anatomy is very similar. It looks different, but these things all work the same way. So normal memories, everyday memories, are stored in the hippocampus, and the hippocampus processes and stores them, and then sorts them based on logic and reasoning. For a dog, that would be things like, where is my food bowl? Or what do we do at this time every day? The prefrontal cortex uses those memories and pulls them to make decisions in the future. And the difference is the amygdala. And the amygdala is where fear and trauma memories are stored. And the amygdala doesn't store events, it stores emotions, whereas the hippocampus stores them as events. I'm sorry. So that being said, they're stored differently. And why that's important is because the way the brain works is always going to choose or make a decision based on what's fastest, more familiar, or easier. So the amygdala, which again stores those fear and negative emotions or memories as emotions, is always going to be faster than the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex. They take longer because they're evaluating these things and they're deciding with logic and reasoning, whereas the amygdala is primed for survival, so it doesn't care about logic and reasoning. So what this means is if you have a dog who has a neutral or a positive memory about something, and then they also have a fearful or negative memory about that same thing, the next time that happens, the amygdala is always going to be faster. So the brain's always going to go negative. And that means that anytime that there's a decision to be made, it's always going to go negative, and you're going to see your dog reacting faster and stronger and more severely to something, even though you feel like they should be getting over it already. So how do we fix that from happening? The only way to override the amygdala's fear response is to build so many positive memories that will get stored in the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex that becomes the easier, faster, more familiar route. And that way, to really, sorry, I lost my place in my notes. To really rewire the fear response, the good memories must outweigh the bad ones by a lot, which is why one bad event can undo all the progress that you've done before, because the amygdala is always going to be faster. And that's really important to know, because a lot of the time your dogs don't make these, they're not logical decisions. They don't realize, oh, I shouldn't be reacting out of that. Or they react to something and then you see seconds later, they're like, oh, that was, a stick instead of a snake or whatever it is, like that's their body reacting. So we just have to do tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of what we want in order for them to react involuntarily the way we want them to. Does that all make sense? I know it's a lot of science.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Moving on. Okay. So in order to do that, here are some of the techniques that work and some of the techniques that don't work. One of the biggest challenges I've seen in the dog training industry is that the term behavioral modification has been watered down and misused. Just because people say that they'll do behavior modification doesn't mean they truly do. And truly modifying a dog's behavior is super complex. So when you go to look for behavioral trainers, be very particular about what you're doing. So I want to talk about what's not behavior modification and some of the things that you'll see if you start to look through them. So the first thing that is not behavioral modification is behavioral management. So behavioral management focuses on preventing unwanted behaviors by controlling the dog's environment and reducing exposure to triggers. It's setting up the dog's world in a way that will minimize their stress and prevent those problem behaviors from happening. This is great, and I use it all the time, and we should continue to use it. However, it's not modification. So if you're changing something, you have to modify it. The second thing that you're going to see is an all positive approach, which is great in theory, and I use positive reinforcement all of the time to teach new things. It's a huge part of my training, but when working with behavior modification, I think there's something lacking in it. And what's lacking is what we've learned from the layered stress model, is that change of any kind is going to create stress. So the all positive approach assumes that dogs should never experience frustration, discomfort, or stress. And the world is hard enough, and I understand that, and nobody wants to put their dog under stress, but any sort of change is going to be stress for, especially these little guys. So what that means is when you have an anxious or fearful dog, their training shouldn't be about just reinforcing good things. especially if you have a dog who's not accepting toys or treats or physical affection. It's very, very hard to use positive reinforcement in that sense. And if a training plan does avoid any stress, their brain's not going to learn to be fluid and flexible, and they're never going to be prepared in the future of how to bounce back from some of these minor things. And then the third thing that you may find when you start to look for behavior modification is probably what you'll see the most. And this is what I call is like obedience disguised as behavior modification. This is going to focus on compliance. So teaching commands like heel or down as a way to disguise behaviors. I constitute this in the way that I explain it to my clients as teaching a dog what to do versus behavior modification is teaching them how to feel about that thing. So in this case, you'll likely see success in the beginning because you'll see the bad behaviors go away. But if you're not truly changing the emotion behind why those behaviors are happening, you're going to see those emotions pop up in other ways. So maybe your dog's not barking on the leash at other dogs anymore because you've taught them to heel and not bark at other dogs, but now they're super, super suppressed and they've got stress boiling inside of them, and that's going to explode in another fashion. And you have a new problem on your hands. So hopefully you can see why handling behavior modification the right way is important, especially, like I said, with little guys like these who are so particular about their emotions. It's really easy to reinforce their fears the wrong way. It's really easy to push them too far and make them shut down. And it's really easy to turn a dog who's trying to communicate with you into a dog who thinks that you don't listen and they're just going to have to step in and defend themselves forever. So, what is behavior modification? This is what I define as behavior modification and what I've seen in my work that actually works. So it's firstly specialized and it's very distinctive from traditional training. And instead of working directly on the behavior that you see, you want, which we do, of course, but we also work directly on the emotion behind the behavior. So working on the emotion behind the behavior indirectly fixes the bad behavior and then prevents it from coming up in all these different ways. Almost all the techniques that I use go beyond teaching commands, beyond eliminating bad behaviors, and beyond rewarding good behaviors. We're reshaping the brain of how to perceive the world. And I do this in what I call the rewire method. These are the 6 core elements that I like to use. They are not in order, and they are not all or nothing. So depending on the dog, you can use some of them or you can use all of them. And the key is knowing which ones to use, and within the ones that we're using, which techniques to use for that particular dog. So briefly touching on some of these, or all of them, we have resilience is the first one. And resilience isn't about forcing your dog into a scary situation and see if they can get out of it. It's about giving them controlled, manageable challenges that they can work through and start to think like, okay, I can do this. This isn't so bad. And the more that they do that, the more that they go through that tiny bit of stress and then overcome it, they get more confident and they feel like they can do it in the future. The E stands for engagement. And essentially, I mean that as working directly with your owner, the dog and the owner working together as a team, and then using play to do so. And I think that play is highly overlooked in dogs in general and dog training in particular. Many of the fearful dogs and the traumatized dogs that I have worked with don't know how to play. And it's not because they don't want to play, but because they don't have they've never had the opportunity to just let go and be a dog and make a choice and like feel good about that choice or feel safe enough to make that choice. And in addition with play activates 3 key parts of the brain: a problem solving, a confidence building, and a stress reduction. So it's kind of this big catch-all. It touches on a lot of these different things. I think it's maybe the most, if not one of the most important things. The W is willingness, and I classify that as frustration tolerance. So when a dog doesn't have frustration tolerance, they're either going to shut down completely, which is the learned helplessness aspect, or they're going to just lose their mind when they get frustrated. They're going to bark and lunge or just pout and quit. So willingness training is about helping these dogs persist through these challenges instead of giving up. So again, I do this similar to how we do resilience training, which is giving them small, winnable challenges, increasing those challenges as they start to get more confident, and teaching them like, I can do this, I can try again. And like when I try things, I get rewarded and it's cool. The I is for independence, so autonomy and decision making. And this is foreign for a lot of these dogs. They were either completely micromanaged or they had to fend for themselves. So in both extremes, they've never thought for themselves in a healthy way. And when I think about independence, when I think about autonomy, it's about giving them safe structure choices. It's not like let your dog do whatever they want to do, but it is teaching them letting them choose when they want to engage with you, when they want to explore, where they want to explore, and teaching them that they do have some control over some of their actions. And regulation, being the next R, is relaxation. And when I talk about relaxation, I'm not just talking about lying down and being still or sleeping. I'm talking about emotional and physiological relaxation while your dog is awake. And many dogs haven't experienced this and live in a constant state of hypervigilance. And the E we have for explore. Exploring and problem solving are not trick training or doing food puzzles only. It's about teaching these dogs how to navigate their life. And without problem solving skills, they may freeze, they may panic or flee, or I've seen dogs who rely completely on the other dog in the household to make all of the decisions, and they don't feel the confidence and they don't feel like they can solve a problem on their own. And so I really like to rewire them to, I don't know what to do. I'm either going to give up, I'm going to default to what you want me to do, into I can figure this out and I can overcome this challenge. So the type of training that I do is about rewiring their brain in the way that they engage with the world, so they can move away from fear or stress or avoidance and go into resilience and adaptability and confidence in the long run. Does anyone have questions about that?
I'm just looking to see if there's hands up, but I don't see any. So we will carry on if you want,
Okay.
Chelsey, till the end. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, and so what to expect with your own rescue dog. So as we know, these dogs aren't the typical confident, well-adjusted golden retriever next door. And so you can't rush some of these things. And what I want this section to go over is I want to set expectations of teach you how to avoid common mistakes and then how to navigate. Every dog has their own unique history, emotional baggage, and learning style, which means that their journey is going to look completely different from other dogs, even dogs who have been through similar backgrounds as them. Some will have immediate success or noticeably improve quickly, and others may take weeks, months, or even longer. And like I said before, I've worked with dogs who have been with their owners for years, and they're just now starting to see them, open up, I guess, if you will, and have the whole host of different problems. So it's very, very different. This is the stages of stage of adjustment that most of these dogs will go through. Some people may be at stage 1, where they just get their dog or they're just going to bring their dog home. And you'll see these dogs very hesitant, reluctant. Some people may be at stage 2, which is where their dog is going to start exploring. They're going to maybe sniff a new area. They may start to show some interest in toys or treats. Stage 3 is typically where I get called, and typically where what I would say is the most critical point. And then that's where they're testing things. This is where these dogs are going to try to make connections. They're going to come into their own, I guess, if they will. And this is where that training has to be very particular, because if they are like, I want to trust you, and then something happens and there's a bunch of setback there. So then we're going almost back to stage 1 when that happens. So the trust section is really, really important. Stage 4, stage 5, those are great. That's when your dog is starting to show more confidence. They're starting to enjoy the world, and they're adapting and self-regulating a lot better. Progress equals recognizing small wins. This is something that I harp on with my clients every day, and I encourage my team to harp on with their clients every day, especially when we work with behavioral training. Because when you work with dogs and you teach obedience training, it's very satisfying to see a dog be successful right away. If you teach a dog to, lay down or go to their place, you can see progress immediately, and it feels good for the owner. In behavior modification, you don't see that. It's very hard, especially when you're in the trenches working with these dogs every day, as owners are. Us as trainers, we get to see them maybe once a week, and then we can see really big improvements. But it's very hard as an owner. You get sucked in and you don't feel like you're making good progress. And so we really, really want people to understand that, like, you have to recognize these small wins. And they're not things that you can see very clearly. They're more emotional shifts. So things like when I say increased curiosity, I mean that your dog may sit and now they watch birds out the window, or you take them on a walk and they start to maybe sniff in a new spot they've never sniffed. When I talk about improved relaxation, I'm talking maybe less sleep startle. Maybe they're not pacing as much. The engagement would be the subtle tail wags. Maybe they bring you their toy and ask you, to play. Maybe when you go to play, they get a little bit scared still, but asking for some of those things are really, really big. Exploring new spaces, that one's pretty obvious. And then being more consistent. And what I mean by being more consistent is maybe they're eating and drinking regularly. Maybe they're going potty regularly. Those type of things are huge for these type of dogs. So even though they seem small from, they're big. And somebody who works with behavior, and I know I have some of my team on this call, and they're going to be listening to it, and they're going to be nodding, and they're going to say, yes, like these are the things that you have to recognize, because when you see them and when you start to recognize them, that's what's going to give you the motivation to keep going, because that happens right before you get over the hump of giving up. So if you take anything away, recognize those small wins. But expect your setbacks. This is fine. Setbacks are temporary. Recognize them as information. Why did this happen? Is my dog stressed today? Did I push too hard? And then give them time to restabilize and then try again. So then when to push and when to pause. And I feel like this is hands down the hardest part of building confidence or working with behavioral cases, especially when you have a fearful, traumatized, or a socially underdeveloped dog. And what I mean by push and pause is you have to push these dogs enough where they can step out of their comfort zone and they can start to build their resilience. So start to overcome some of these fears. But if you push them too hard, they might shut down or they go into a panic. And then when do you pause? When do you know this is too much for them? In that balance of, do I ask them to face their fears, or is this too much for them? That's really, really hard to do unless you work with somebody and we can start to recognize some of that. So that's kind of some of the things I want to talk about today. Okay. First example we have here is if you're trying to get your dog to approach a new person, and I don't want this person to touch my dog, but what I do want is there to be some sort of interaction. I want them to engage a little bit. In this case, I would say this is okay to push your dog. the dog, and all of these dogs, they're all doing the same or similar things. They're watching this person. They're not actively avoiding them. They seem interested. They're leaning slightly forward. Even if they go forward and maybe take a couple of steps back, like that's also okay. So in this case, what I would ask this person to do is maybe like this guy has his hand right here. I like that. Maybe the dog can like boop his nose a little bit, or we put a treat in there. Maybe we can do this game that I call treat and retreat, which is going to be good. So the dog is able to step away, but then come back closer. But we want to push them a little bit, give them an opportunity to continue this interaction. Now, in the same situation, this is when we would approach a new person and we should pause. In these cases, the dog his ears are up. You can see the whites of his eyes right here. They look super stiff. They look super uncomfortable. Their tails might be stiff. In these cases, we want to pause and not encourage this situation to continue. What I would ask is maybe this person just turns around and walks away. Maybe you can call your dog back to you. Try something to de-escalate this. It can always, in the next moment, turn into a push situation, but right here, this is all not good. Okay. Next situation, we're walking through a threshold. This is a situation I see all of the time, especially with these former research dogs. They hate hallways. They hate doorways. They don't like going from outside to inside. They freak out on this. So a lot of the people that I work with have trouble getting their dog to go through certain doorways. In these situations that we see right here, these are all okay to push the dog, to encourage them to continue here. The dog may be pausing, but they're not in a complete panic. They may be leaning slightly forward. They may be taking a couple steps back. That's all okay. What I would do in this case, one of the first things that I like to do is, if your dog is food motivated, I like to toss treats on one side of the door and then the other side, and then one side and then the other side, just so your dog is going back and forth between the two. If they're not able to go back and forth between the two, I like to work right in their comfort zone, right outside the door, and then we just start building a little bit closer. Okay, in this situation, this is where we should pause. Clearly, all of these dogs are uncomfortable. They are refusing to move. They're actively pulling backwards. They're flattening to the ground. A lot of the time when you add pressure to the leash, you'll see them start to panic or pancake. This is where they're not going to learn. They're not going to process any information. So this is a circumstance where you should pause and not encourage them to do it in this case. So what I would do is I would leave the situation. Maybe if they're food motivated, I'll put some treats around the area and see if they'll explore it later on their own. But more than likely, I just leave this alone and come back to it at a different time once they regulate a little bit. Okay. And the third example is if you're introducing a toy. These cases, I would push the dog. This dog looks a little bit weird, but he's still interested in this toy. So in these cases, the dogs may sniff it, may look at it, may bop it with their paw. These are when I would push the dog. And what I would do here is I always think that moving toys are a lot more fun than toys sitting boring on the ground. So I would probably tie a string or maybe a leash to one of these toys and give the dog some space and wave that toy around a little bit. So try to harness some of their prey drive. Sometimes when you have a toy that's super squeaky or super noisy, that is alarming. So you can try maybe a soft, squishy one instead. But I would try to encourage the dog to play with this for sure. And these are situations where I would pause. Again, the dog does not look interested. You can see the furrowed brows here. You can see the ears. This one looks stiff. This one looks like he could bite that hand any moment. These are moments where they don't want anything to do with those toys. This one honestly looks like he could be guarding this toy in that one. So in this case, I would walk away. I would probably leave the toy out and see if this dog will play with it when I'm not around. So a lot of these dogs have a fear of playing in front of their owner, and they're more confident more on their own. So you can try and see if that works too. But again, this is just, I would probably wait until I try this for at least a day or so until they can calm down. Does anyone have questions about those particular things?
I see Connie has a question, but it's a little bit outside of this, so I'll just wait. We'll just wait until the question and answer period.
All right, we are almost finished, so we'll be getting there shortly. So high level, when to push and when to pause. If you think about it in this fashion, is this a controlled situation? Does my dog have a real shot at handling this? Is their stress level low? Like, how much stress are they carrying today? And then if they're hesitant, that's okay, but are they able to bounce back and ask for your help or ask for some engagement from you? In these situations, push them. Try to encourage it. If your dog is in an uncontrollable situation where they have a shot at failing, or they have a shot of getting spooked or injuring themselves, for instance, if you take your dog out in public and you randomly come across a training opportunity, it might not be the best time. Have they had a big day of stress and are they just shut down? Like, that's a good time to pause. Okay, so other common issues. Here's some of the other common issues I see in these former research dogs that I just want to briefly touch over and give some good ideas of maybe how we can work through some of them. Blanket information is always like not awesome, but here's just some overview. I really like to get the particulars of the case before I give definitive information, but these are some of the things that generally can help. So a lot of these dogs have potty training issues and poop eating issues. They've never had a consistent potty routine. They've either been stacked in crates on top of each other, or they've been all in an area together where it's not structured. It's gross. So they go to those new owners and they've got this new, all of these fun new potty issues. The first thing that I always tell dogs and puppies who are dealing with this issue is get a consistent schedule. And what I mean by that is for a week, get a piece of paper and write down every time your dog is eating and drinking and going potty, whether that's inside or outside. And in that week, you can start to find patterns. Oh, my dog eats every day at 8 a.m. and by 8 a.m. and by 10 a.m., he's going poop. So then you start to know kind of how their body is digesting, and you can start to predict things a little bit more. The second thing I would say is use a long leash. So I almost all of the time like potty training to be done on leash. However, these dogs more than likely haven't ever had a leash, or they don't feel comfortable with restraint. So a long leash is a really good option. It keeps them safe, but it also gives them more of a freedom. So there are super good, sturdy, long leashes that are 15 feet to 30 feet. Your dog may feel more comfortable venturing off a little bit and going potty on that leash. And then a rule of thumb for inside the house I like to do is called watch or confine. So if you can't have your eyes directly on your dog, they could be in the crate or in a pen or maybe right next to you. But if you watch or confine them, they're not sneaking into your guest room and going potty in there and then eating it. So having your eyes on them or keeping them in somewhere where they're not going to go potty is always a great way to overcome this. And then for poop eating in general, obviously it seems silly, but like pick it up. You could teach a leave it command so they go potty and they could leave it there. But the most success I have found with poop eating is consulting a canine dietitian. And a lot of the time poop eating is a lack of a specific nutrient. So for instance, like us as humans, if we're lacking iron or whatever, we'll crave steak. And so when dogs have that issue, they will eat their poop. For some reason, they just biologically think, oh, I'll get more in there. So I've had a lot of success working with the dietitians and changing the diet to a different type of food or a different brand of food, like a fresh food or a raw food or just a better brand of like the dry kibble. And a lot of the time that or adding some vitamins, minerals into their food fixes that problem completely. So that's one of the steps I would do there. Okay, resource guarding. Resource guarding is huge, especially resource guarding to other dogs. A lot of these dogs don't necessarily resource guard to humans. Some definitely do, but most of the time it's to other dogs. And prevention and management is always where I start with. That is as easy as if you have two dogs or one dog is resource guarding their meal with another dog, feed them separately. Nobody should have to worry about somebody hovering over them while they're eating. Pick up high value toys or treats when they're around each other. Part of management that I like to do for resource guarding is I teach a leave it command and I teach a place command, place being go to your bed or go to your spot. And what that does is in the moments I see something maybe starting, I'm able to, okay, you guys leave it and you go there and you go there, just so I can catch it in the moment and prevent something from happening. Direct confrontation. Don't walk directly up to your dog who has a high value resource or their food. Don't put your hands in their food. Dogs guard from people and dogs that they don't trust. So we're almost giving them a little leeway here will convince them they don't have to necessarily guard from you. Trading up is if you have to take something away. For instance, if your dog is chewing on a toy and their little squeaker is about to come out and you want to go get that squeaker, then what I would suggest is bring something really good. So maybe bring them a really good bone or maybe bring them a really good toy or do something so you're not just taking, you're also giving. And that isn't going to change everything, but it definitely will help. And most of the time, like I said, resource guarding, it stems from insecurity. It stems from fear. A lot of the time it's genetic, but I don't usually see that with beagles. So when you work through the emotional stuff, the behavioral stuff that we're doing, a lot of the time resource guarding goes away. It's one of those indirect things that go away as the more you do behavioral training. However, there are cases where we do need to actually do behavioral training with it, and that's where this resource guarding protocol would come in. So there are really good resources out there. We have really good protocols, and that's just good old-fashioned desensitizing, counter conditioning for some of these things. But like I said, a lot of the time when you do more confidence building and different behavioral training, these things tend to go away on their own. Okay, and the last thing is panicking when they're approached them or when we approach them. So I say make them feel safe and then escape route. So what I mean by that is I don't want this dog to completely run away, but I want them to feel as if they can. So if instead of blocking all of the doors in the room, let them know, okay, like I potentially can go into, the library or I can wherever I need to go, and let them think that there's some sort of escape route. Let them initiate that. Like I said before, it is better to play hard to get. So I like to get really low on their level, sit on the ground, lie on the ground, let them come over and investigate me a little bit. And most importantly, leave when they want to leave. And that's something I learned when I was a child. And I actually grew up with cats. And I would always want to tame these kittens. And my dad said, the cats will like you if you don't just hold them and you let them like run away from you. And that's something with dogs too. They'll feel comfortable and they feel like they can come and hang out with you if they know that they can leave also. Treat and retreat, like I said, that's one of the protocols that we use all the time. I think when a lot of people want their dog to like strangers or like them, they offer food from their hand. And I don't think that's fair for the dog because then they have to choose of go and be uncomfortable near this person and get a treat or forego this treat. Whereas treat or retreat, it kind of switches things up a little bit. So your dog gets the treat, but they also want to get closer to the person because they want to get closer to the person. So something like that is good. And then also just recall command. So come. So teaching your dog that when you say their name and when you say come and they take, even if it's a baby step towards you, they'll get highly rewarded for that. So learning that approaching you brings something positive versus approaching you, you're going to grab them and put their harness on, or you're going to grab them and go to the vet or whatever that may be. Okay. So those are those. Okay. So how can we help in these situations? So we've covered a lot. We've talked about understanding trauma, how biology affects behavior and behavior affects biology, the techniques that I think work and don't work, and then what to expect in your own journey. But this is just the beginning. This is just an hour of me rambling on about this. And it's a high level viewpoint of what I see and what we can do here. So the real work actually happens when we take these things and we tailor them to your individual dog. So we figure out what your dog needs, what's going to work best for them, and then we can make adjustments as we go along. So a dog, every dog is unique. What may work for one may not work for the other. And that's why, like I said, I don't love blanket advice, but generally speaking, things are better when they're more specific. I lost my place. Okay. Sorry. Whether you're dealing with a dog who has deep-seated fear and anxious behavior, or you're feeling stuck in this situation, I'm here for as much or as little as you would like. I always love bouncing questions off of each other. We have different resources. This is by no means a sales pitch, but here are the things we offer. We have online ebooks. You can learn at your own pace, have structured techniques. We do behavioral consultations. That's, an hour to hour and a half conversation where you info dump on me now, and then we can reassess what's going on with your dog, give you immediate tangible steps. And then what I find is most beneficial in these cases is clarity. Is a lot of the time it just feels good to know, okay, like someone gets it. I'm not alone. There is hope in the future. And that is really important in one of the consultations. And then we also do virtual coaching, which is primarily what we do for the former research beagles that we work with, because we do work with people all over the country. I'm in North Carolina and we have clients all over. With our virtual coaching, you work at home. It's a live call with your trainer, and we make the training plan specific to you, and you work through that at your own pace. But what's great about that is you really bond with your dog and you start to see progression really, really quickly. Okay, so first, thank you. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this, it's that these dogs don't need just training. They also need to be understood. There is no shortcut to healing the nervous system, but with the right techniques, these dogs can adapt to the world around them. I think dogs like this need every advocate behind them, every expert behind them, and every compassionate hand that they can get. So I am grateful that I'm working here alongside Lori and the Beagle Alliance. These people that we work with share the same commitment. And I want to thank you for letting me be here today. Thank you, all of the guests, for showing up for your dogs today or showing up to support us. And this is exactly what we need to get out into the world to make these dogs thrive or help these dogs thrive in the future. So I'm going to end there. Let's get to questions.
Yes, thank you, Chelsey. That was amazing. Thank you. And you really did touch on everything that we've seen over the years. And that we still see, and it is important to realize that every dog is individual and we see them at different stages. So thank you all for being here. Number one, I see that there's a lot of people that I've not seen before. So welcome. I appreciate it. The Beagle Alliance is actually a Canadian charity, but we work across North America. We've placed over 70 dogs, or helped place over 70 former research beagles into homes since we started a couple of years ago. And we started these town halls because these dogs really are special needs, and there's not a lot of advocates behind a former research dog. It's a really hidden, insidious world that's very secretive, and these dogs need all the support they can get. from the beginning, just having them released is a miracle itself in some cases. So once they're out and trying to navigate the world, we just want to have as many tools in the toolbox to, just as Chelsey said, help them thrive. So thank you. That was just amazing. I see your hand up, Samantha. Thank you. And so um, Connie's question is this, Chelsey: is it common for a traumatized dog to become more attached to one person in the household? Her dog Astro, she's saying, is still nervous with her husband, but she is his person. Astro was a dog that the Beagle Alliance rescued over a year ago now. It was one of the most traumatized group that we had seen. All of the dogs in that group were having problems, mostly with the men in their lives. We, over the years, attribute that to a couple of things. One, that the male is likely, there's more males in that industry and in the facility handling them in a harmful way, I must say. But I would love your comment on this, Chelsey, because we look at that a little bit. The Beagle Alliance, in our experience, looks at that's a little bit of resource guarding.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right in all of that. I'd say 90% of the dogs that we work with attach to the female in the household more than the male. When it is the male, typically it's more of an emotional male. I don't want to generalize, but men are typically bigger, typically speak at a deeper voice, and typically less emotional. They're more black and white. So I see it a lot. I do think it can be a form of resource guarding. It can definitely evolve into resource guarding. If, for instance, you and your spouse, Connie, go to hug and Astro gets upset at that, or you're sitting with Astro and your husband walks by and Astro gets upset at that, that's definitely resource guarding. What could have possibly happened is what's called imprinting. And so imprinting is a very initial moment that is just captured like a screenshot. And so if Astro imprinted on you, he imprinted this like, you're safe, you're my person, I get the information that I need from you, you take care of me. And dad just didn't get that. So dad could be a threat in the resource guarding realm. He could be a threat to you as a resource. Or it could just be as simple as he hasn't bonded in that way with dad. A lot of the times what we'll do in these cases is, like, I'm going to talk about play, but if he plays with him, that's a really good way to bond. Of course, I'm sure you've heard or you've tried to have dad like feed him, walk him, all of these positive things. Could work, couldn't work. I would try play if you haven't done that. Definitely advocate for dad. So if Astro's upset and there's no reason, maybe move him off of the couch or whatnot, try to kind of set some of those boundaries. But a lot of the time it happens. I would say most of the time dogs will pick one or the other. It's not always as dramatic as what it sounds like is going on there. But even in my household, I mean, my husband is the one who feeds our dog and plays with our dog, and I'm there for the cuddles. So he's more bonded to him in that type of way too. So yes, it's common. Yes, it could be a variety of different things. But until it gets bad, until it gets dangerous, or if your husband is feeling sad about it, then there's definitely things that you can do to improve it.
Yeah, and when we place the dogs in foster prior to adoption, and just to see how everybody works out together and the dynamic within the household and with the other dogs and the kids, if that's the case, we do suggest that everybody share the chores and do things together, feed together, walk together, split them up so that everybody gets equal time and that the dog does not latch on to the one person that is doing everything for them. They've never had anything in their lives, and all of a sudden this one person's doting on them, or that kind of thing. We try to mitigate. Yeah, we try to work around that as best we can, but it doesn't,
It's hard
it's
too.
a scheduling thing. Yeah, it does.
It
It's not always
is.
going to happen, right?
It
Just
really
can't.
is. It's
Yeah,
hard. And I mean, I don't blame the dogs for it. I don't blame the people for
exactly.
doing
Exactly.
it and or feeling, sad if dad's upset about it. I don't blame any of it. It's an unfortunate circumstance with these cases. But yeah, I mean, if you think about it in the manner like Lori's saying is I had kind of a crappy life and like mom came along and now this is everything I wanted and I don't want to risk losing it and I don't want to risk opening myself up to someone else either.
Yeah. Thank you. Connie, if you would like anything more, just type away and I will watch the chat. But Samantha, go ahead.
Awesome. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Chelsey. This was just so wonderful and very helpful. Um, I have two questions. So, just to confirm with you called it treat and retreat. I liked how you said like it's not really fair to hold the treat and because then you're asking them to choose between putting themselves in an uncomfortable situation versus just forfeiting the treat. So are you saying you toss the treat kind of nearby them or nearby yourself, or like what if it's a new stranger and you're like how do you navigate that?
Yeah, treat and retreat is amazing. I like it set up, or if you can elicit a stranger to help you, but the high level viewpoint is say, like, I'm the stranger and I have treats, and obviously your dog has to be food motivated for this, but use something super high value. And if your dog is in that push manner where they're hesitant but interested a little, what I do is I have the stranger throw the treats behind the dog or at like a 10 or 2 angle. So the dog has to almost turn completely to the side or turn completely around, go away from the stranger to get the treat. And then the more you do that, you kind of like throw a treat that way, throw a treat that way. And so then what you see is your dog now learns like, you have really yummy treats. And also, I don't have to get close to you to get them. So you actually build trust in that manner. And you find that the dogs will go and get a treat and they actually start like bopping a little bit closer to the stranger because they're like, "Look, where's the next one?"
Yeah.
But then obviously what can happen is if you reach out and you're like, "Oh, yay, we're friends," like that ruins it. But treat and retreat, yeah, like just the treat part, but then also maybe your dog gets brave and gets a little close, then I'm like, well, throw it far away again. Just let them know I can always go to the other way. But
Right.
yeah, like I said, like you find the dogs actually coming close and some of them start like nosing you of like, throw it, dude, and it's really, really cool to watch.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm glad I asked then because I missed that. Okay, my second question for trade up. So my family, he's just your typical yellow lab, just very food motivated, no trauma in his life, but oh my God, he's just a little terror. Like we somehow trained him accidentally to like he steals things, like he'll eat like a loaf of bread and or if he takes a mitt, right? We give him a treat to get the mitt back, but now we basically taught him if you steal something, you'll get a treat. So we it just I've been wanting to help my mom because I'm like I feel like we broke the dog because we totally ruined yeah. Now he gets treats all the time for doing bad things.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a lab. Like labs and I think golden retrievers are notorious for stealing and like actually eating all of these
Yes.
things.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
such a lab.
Yeah.
Okay, so your question is you accidentally trained your dog. First,
Yeah.
good. I always tell people like when you accidentally train your dog something, like I have some people who I'll tell them to reward their dog when their dog is barking because it will get the attention off of what they're barking at. And they're like, what if I accidentally train them to bark? And I'm like, good. Like I can, fix barking, but the emotion or like the deeper lying issue is gone. But in your case, if you have a dog who's now like almost pranking you where he's like, I'm gonna go get this in your face, then I would work more proactively. So if you see that something is set up, I would do what I call like bridging. So teach him an alternative behavior. So instead of like, I'm going to go steal this because I want something good, ask him to do something else. That you want, even if it's like a trick, like, oh, spin around and like, here's this thing. Or what you can do is in the moment, if he is stealing something and you need to do a trade up, then, I don't know if you have a leave it or a drop it or like a come command, but I would probably stop. I don't know if he's making you chase him. I would stop chasing him, make him come to you in that sense. And so start putting some more like structure behind the bad behavior. So he may be doing it because it's a game, but if you add some like bridging or add some structure to it, he might like go pretend to steal something and then do the alternate behavior.
Right. Okay.
Other than that, if you can proactively see it's about to happen, your best bet is going to be doing like obedience or management in there, which is like leave it or don't or go do something else.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, they're so smart sometimes when
Yeah.
when that
He plays
happens.
the
That's so
dummy,
true.
and then
Yeah.
he's totally been pranking us for years.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like lab puppies are great at that where they'll steal something. They're like, oh, you're not going to get me. And then they like run away and you're like, okay, well, I have to, but this isn't great. Try to get him to come to you. Try to get him to, if you can, again, if you can catch it before it happens, try to do that. If it happens in the moment, ask for something else. So you're not just rewarding the bad behavior, you're actually rewarding the trick or whatever you're asking him to do.
Right. That
That's
makes
your
sense.
first step.
Thank you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. He's 9 years old. I feel like he's a lost
Yeah.
cause.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Sam. Thanks, Sam. Thanks a lot. I just want to touch on something Sam said, though, too, is about, oh, I feel like we broke him because I do, people, we've had people who become discouraged who are fosters and they feel, and they've used the term foster fail and not in the good way, that they're going to adopt and we're living happily ever after, so to speak. But they feel like failures, and I'm always saying to people, you're not failing the dog, especially speaking with regards to former research dogs. These dogs were slated to not live. And if it weren't for incredible fosters and adopters, like most of you probably are, of rescue dogs, these dogs wouldn't even have a chance. So we just have to not only be patient with the dog, but patient with ourselves. And for those of you, as I say, I don't know a lot of you here, if you have adopted a former research dog, and you did not get that dog from an organization that you can reach out to or that you have carried on a relationship with, don't feel that you don't have anyone. We work with all sorts of people. And if you want to reach out to the Beagle Alliance, we don't pretend to know all the answers, but this is why we are trying to build a community with people like Chelsey and other advocates and other trainers that we have, so that we can help you and the dogs. Whether you adopted from us or not is not the point. We want you guys to succeed, and we want we want these dogs to thrive. And thank you, for all of you that have a rescue animal, because they needed you. They wouldn't have made it without you. So be a little softer on yourselves.
I totally agree. I talk to my clients about that all the time, and they feel discouraged. And I tell them, firstly, like the fact that you're thinking that already says that you're not failing, because you're trying. And a lot of the times you do the best, or if not all the time, you do the best with what you have at the time. And it may not be all the information or the right decisions. And you may have been at a time in your life where you didn't have as much to give as you do now. But if you are trying and you're doing what you can, like that's not failing. It's not failing to feel like you're failing. It's not failing to stop and start over. It's not failing to ask for help. That's just like actually doing the right thing. That's doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're not supposed to know how to work with these dogs. You're not a professional dog trainer. You're not somebody who knows what goes on behind closed doors. You're just the most important part of this, which is the owners who are just trying their best. And that's what, like Lori said, we're here to help in any way we can with all the resources that we can possibly give you, so you can go and move forward and make the most educated decision for your particular circumstance.
Exactly. Yeah, perfect. Does anyone else have any more questions? Connie said thank you. Nick said thank you in the chat. I did put Chelsea's website in the chat a couple times for you guys to see, but if you missed that, feel free to email us or go back on the site. We've got the link to Chelsea's site, and as well we'll have this up on our website and we'll let you guys know about that. But I guess we're pretty good, unless anybody else has any questions. Looks good, but Chelsey, truly cannot thank you enough.
Thank you.
I think this was really excellent. I think that, to be honest, I think this is definitely something I would share with our potential fosters and have them even just take a look at the things you said prior to fostering, so that it's already adding to sort of their preparation in fostering and possibly adopting a former research dog. So I really appreciate it. I'm sure we'll be in touch, and thank you so much for putting together the presentation and for your time.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for everyone else for showing up too.
Yes, thank you everybody, and we hope to see you soon at the next town hall. So take care.